Hi everyone, welcome to Planet Health Podcast. We're with Brad Parkinson today, of course, and myself, Shannon. And today we thought we'd talk about liver detoxification and general detoxification. So Brad, tell us a little bit about the basics of detoxing in the body.
Okay, well, let's look at the liver. What we have with the liver, we've got phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. So we get endotoxic toxins within that need to be detoxified through phase 1 and phase 2. Also exotoxins coming from outside, and we usually call these xenobiotics. So anything from drugs, food additives, environmental toxins, they're considered xenobiotics. And these are things that aren't naturally produced within the body and need to be broken down and then excreted. So we have phase 1, phase 2 liver pathways, which we'll go into a bit more in a minute. So the liver is considered a detoxification organ because it can break down these xenobiotics. Now, we also have things like the kidney and the lymph, which also work on breaking down certain chemical compounds that travel through them, and they're considered organs of detoxification as well. Now, we often talk, we are commonly hearing things like phase 0 and phase 3 in detoxification, and these are really more referring to, or phase 3, they're really referring to the elimination pathways. And then you have organs of elimination, which include the bowel, the gallbladder, the bladder, lungs, and the skin. Now, when we're eliminating, we're not necessarily detoxifying. We're not necessarily breaking down these xenobiotics. So I think it's important to note the difference there. When we're eliminating, it's not necessarily a detox. So when you're hearing things like the gallbladder detox and this sort of thing, it's a little bit different to true liver detoxification, where we're looking at phase 1, that's breaking down things, hydrolyzing, and then phase 2, which is conjugating these xenobiotics, or the xenobiotic compounds that have been hydrolyzed. So I think there's a distinct difference there between detoxification and elimination, and quite often what you'll see in your health shops or your supermarkets advertise detox this, detox that. A lot of the time they're talking about elimination, not necessarily working on true detoxification.
So what I love about you, Brad, is you're so knowledgeable and you have so much to give. But for the common people watching the video, they might be thinking, well, hold on, I just want to detox. And the common thing that we often hear is, well, why would you need to detox? Because your body does that anyway. Your body's just naturally detoxing. So why do we need to look at all of these phase 1 and phase 0, and what does it all mean, Brad? Simple terms.
Look, it's a very good, you make a very good point. And generally when we're having good nutrition, water, and our lifestyle and diet is healthy, again, a clean diet, when we're having preferably organic foods and so forth, then the load on the liver as such, these pathways, is not going to be as great, and the necessity for a targeted detox is probably not necessary. And most people can go about their lives, but there are incidences where there's polymorphism. Some people will have a faster phase 1 than they will phase 2, and that phase 1 can generate more free radicals, which will cause damage and can lead to things like headaches and so forth. So there can be imbalances between the two, and I think it's important to target those things. And one of the other functions of the liver is bile and breaking down fats as well. So it's a very important organ to maintain health. But if you've got these xenobiotics, these drugs, food additives, environmental toxins constantly bombarding your system, the liver is really having to really work hard. And we see this with people like tradesmen or people working around toxic chemicals, or your classic hairdresser that's in a, you just walk into there and you can smell all the fumes and everything, those nail clinics and so forth. A lot of those people are very exposed to these xenobiotics, and their liver's just working overtime. And then you can see things like fatigue set in, and this is where they really need a lot of support the specifically phase 1 and phase 2 detox.
Mm-hmm. So what about we go into the second topic of a little bit clarity between the different phases of the detox? Can you shed some light there?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first phase 1 we've been mentioning. These are basically the enzymes, the cytochrome P450 enzymes, and there's other cytochrome enzymes too. So they're involved in hydrolysis, so they're and reduction and oxidation. So they're breaking down that original chemical compound that our body's coming into contact with. And what the job of phase 1 is to do is to break this compound down, so then phase 2 can deal with it and start the conjugation process, which leads to elimination. So before these toxins, say like for example, drugs will be broken down in this cycle, and that's how we sometimes that's how we measure the half-life of these drugs, is when they're broken down. Now, in some cases, some drugs are actually activated when they go through the phase 1 process, which is an interesting way to medicate, but they're designed that way. So we're having a greater understanding of this process, and pharmaceutical companies are using this process to actually administer drugs and or to break down drugs to make them active when they're within the body. Look, yeah, it's a very important part of the process. And when they do break down in this phase, they can quite often be free radicals or dangerous to our system. And if our phase 2, which is really mopping them up, as for lack of a better term, if that's underactive, or we don't have the nutrient or the cofactors to within the phase 2, then phase 1 can be quite detrimental to health, and it can cause headaches, fatigue, and be quite damaging.
Yeah, it's such a huge topic, and we only have a short time for it, but that's excellent. And there's a heavy focus so far on the liver, but as Brad mentioned earlier, there's the kidneys and the skin and the lungs and the lymphatics, and there's the whole bodily processes getting rid of waste. So so that's great. So basically, we're with a patient to help detoxing them, we're supporting their natural pathways by giving them these little bits in the factory of detoxification and the pathways. Is that right to say, Brad?
Yeah, that's right. And, supporting phase 1 and phase 2 can be two different approaches. And a lot of our liver herbs that we use might emphasize one phase over the other. Like we may need better support in phase 1, but we might need to slow phase 1 down too, so phase 2 can manage better. And we've got the ability to do that with our herbal medicines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and probably to add, now more than ever in this world, if we just have a look at the environment, the amount of chemicals, the oceans, the plastics, the xenobiotics, the heavy metals, we really need that support to assist those detoxification pathways. And then pharmaceutical drugs on top of that. If someone's on heavy pain medication for years, then that is definitely taking a toll on their liver. Mm-hmm. There are so many pharmaceuticals too. So supporting that is a really good idea.
Mm.
If you were to give the viewers 1 or 2 golden tips that they can do right now to support their detoxification, what would you say?
Well, let's talk a bit about phase 2 first.
Okay, sorry.
You're right, but because this is where the tips can come into play as well. With phase 2, that's a conjugation pathway. So when phase 1 metabolizes the xenobiotics, we have these conjugation pathways, which include glutathionation, glycination, glucuronidation, sulfation, acetylation, and methylation. So what are all these things? Some people have heard of methylation. It's a chemical process within the body, and it has various functions. So these are all different pathways within the what we call phase 2 liver detox that can convert these dangerous end metabolites from the xenobiotics into harmless non-active compounds that can be easily eliminated. Now, with some helpful tips in regard to supporting liver function, I think this is where it's really important to maintain adequate protein, so you can get your amino acids, and those amino acids can help support a lot of these pathways. And when we look at our sulfur-containing fruit and vegetables too, that's great for our sulfation pathways as well. And then things like your B vitamins, certain nutrients or minerals will help with as cofactors. Say, like we all know, B vitamins and methylation are very important there too. So it's getting those right, and that's why a balanced diet's very important. We quite often look at fruit and veg and categorize them. A lot of people will categorize them as carbohydrates, and if they want to go low carb, they sort of bring down the fruit and veg. But fruit and veg have a lot of amino acids through them as well, and like I mentioned before, some of them are very high sulfur containing as well. So again, there's a lot of emphasis on eating right and eating good fresh fruit and veg, and important then to have organic, especially if we've got compromised liver function or a heavier burden on the liver, because you don't want the glyphosates or anything extra coming through on those the fruit and veg. But then looking at all the colors of the rainbow, so looking at all the antioxidants, so we've got more of an anti-inflammatory action there too. That'll also help lower the load on phase 2 as well. And overall, always keep hydrated. And that's going to help with eliminating these end metabolites.
Mm-hmm. So the biggest one is limiting the amount of toxins coming into us, and then that obviously takes the load off those organs that are detoxing. Yeah, great. And and we could talk for days on this topic, but I think that covers it. It covers the basics for sure.
Yep. Yeah.
So, have you got anything more to add, Brad?
No, look, I think, like you said, we can go on a little bit more, but I mean, one thing I found interesting in the literature just recently is that we often talk phase 1, phase 2 as a 1-2 process. However, there are chemical compounds that will break down through phase 2 initially and then phase 1, so which is an interesting thing to look at, because certain functional liver tests will be based on that 1-2 punch. So not all functional testing is appropriate here. So good case taking, again, is going to be important. And I know probably you would agree on that with your cases you've had in clinic, and especially if we're looking at mold cases or really bizarre toxins that come through people's systems. You've really got to be clever about how you go about treating those people. And chronic inflammatory response syndrome, we're getting a lot more literature behind this specific illness, which is quite common, and you do find it with a lot of people with mold exposure and what have you. And they can be very tricky, and it can be time-consuming treating the liver when it's been exposed to such toxic compounds. So, and look, we're learning things even about the microbiome and how that's got an ability to break down different toxins, and it obviously converts different vitamins and minerals for us within in the gut as well. So that could be another potential area, and I think it's even considered as a phase 0 in a lot of cases of detoxification as well. So just might be of interest to some of our listeners out there.
Mm-hmm. And the classic leaky gut, because we'll be reabsorbing a lot of the toxins back through the body again if we don't get that right.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So, Brad, where do people find you?
They can find me at www.bradparkinson.com.au or Brad Parkinson Naturopath. Look me up and you'll find me all over Google, the net, and Facebook there as well.
And making other amazing videos too, and blog posts and giving so much to everyone.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Brad.
All right. And where can everyone find you, Shannon?
I'm at Cura Medicine, CURA medicine.com.au.
Excellent. All right. Bye for now.
Okay, see ya.